Tuesday. My name is Abbie Richie. I'm the founder of Senior Savvy, which helps older adults with their technology. And every Tuesday, you can find me right here talking with people who are engaged in tech innovation as it impacts residents living in senior living communities. It couldn't be a more exciting place to be right now. Before I bring my guests on today, I want to go ahead and run our intro. Welcome back. Let me go ahead and bring our guests on. First, I have Patricia Jacobs with Juniper Communities. Welcome, Patricia. It's lovely to see you here today.
Thank you, Abbie. Great to be with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And then I'm also having on Joe Velderman of Cypress Living. And welcome back to the show, Joe. You're a regular at this point.
It's great to join you again today, Abbie. Happy Tech Tuesday.
Yeah, Tech Tuesday, the day where a lot of things could go wrong at any minute. And we just deal with it, right? We just absorb it and deal with it because it's just part of living in today's world. So I wanted to invite Patricia and Joe on because they're very engaged in tech innovation at their communities. And I just felt like the two of them on together would bring more information, more depth, more knowledge to this space. So first, Patricia, tell us how long you've been with Juniper and what you're seriously passionate about today.
Okay, thanks, Abbie. I've been with Juniper a little over a year, but I've actually been involved in adding technology into senior living since 2014, when I opened a high-tech, high-touch campus for Erickson Living outside New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So I've really gotten excited year after year about the expanding options for our senior living communities.
Excellent. And Joe, let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself to our viewers, even though I'm sure they already know you.
Thanks, Abbie. Yeah, I serve as a VP of Innovation for Cypress Living in beautiful Southwest Florida and Fort Myers, Florida. We have a single site CCRC campus, or a rather large CCRC campus with about 650 residents on it, and then ever growing home and community-based services organization that we call Cypress at Home, supporting several hundred community participants here in Southwest Florida. I've been involved in tech, I guess, since I was in high school. My grandma was an early adopter of a platform, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was a set-top box for her TV that allowed her to browse the web and get email and stuff like that. Web TV, it was called. And she just loved that thing. She would travel from the Midwest down here to Florida every year for snowbirding, and every year it was like mission critical to make sure Web TV got hooked up for her when she got down here to her condo in Florida. So I've been supporting older adults for quite a few years, but here professionally at Cypress Living for going on 4 years now.
I'd love to hear how, our grandparents have impacted where we're at today. I spent a lot of time with my Nana and Papa growing up, and because of that, I have a deep love and admiration for older adults. It's truly why I do what I do. And people say, "Oh, you must be so patient," but to me, this is passion. And I think that older adults are the absolute best people to be with. So with that in mind, though, there is a bit of adoption, right? Like there's a little bit of a hesitancy to adoption. I know for myself, anytime someone says this is going to be new or we got to change it, my first thought is, and then I'm like, okay, all right, lean into it. But when it comes to a lack of familiarity with technology, and how that's going to impact residents, how do you find that to be with your residents? Patricia?
Okay. I do feel like there is a concern among everybody in adopting technology, and I would include everybody, That nobody wants to look stupid.
Mhm.
And nobody wants to seem like they're out of touch or seem like they're not in step. Um, and so I think there's fear with everybody, and just like you said, with adopting new technology. I think we all feel that way. I do think that for older adults, the surprise to me is just like us, it has to be worth it. You know, if someone wants you to make a change in your life, you have to have a reason, right? You have to, why is this going to be better? You're making me use a new phone, you're giving me new technology. Why do I want it? Why is it better? And my most successful deployments of technology are the ones where the payoff was really clear.
Mhm.
So the you need to do this for technology's sake, not a good sell with anybody, but maybe even a worse sell with older adults.
Yeah.
And I think the assumed it's new, it's going to be better is not assumed in older adults. I will tell you a funny story. We in one of the communities I opened, we put in all electronic door locks.
Okay.
And every resident had an electronic key, just a key card, right? And it was a proximity reader. You didn't have to insert it like a hotel key. You just had to get it near the lock, and it worked. And there was much trepidation in the operations team about how older adults would like this technology. And it was rapidly accepted beautifully. Everyone loved it. No, nobody likes to fumble with a key, honestly. Nobody likes the way they scratch up your pockets. You know, they're heavy. And if you lose one, it's a big deal, right? Because then there's this hard key floating around. There's a security risk associated with it. I have never seen technology adopted so rapidly by a group of older adults as I did electronic keys. So it is not just universally, I don't want to do it. It's got to have an edge of there's something really good about this for me. And then people get over things pretty fast.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. How about you, Joe? How, in your experience, has a lack of familiarity with technology put a blockage towards adoption?
Yeah, well, I want to take a minute and kind of break down this notion that older adults have a trepidation to adopting new technology. I think that that's rapidly changing right now. I think there's an ever evolving consumer expectation that there will be technology. And it was put into perspective for me just a couple of months ago. Next week in California, Apple's going to be releasing the iPhone 15, right? Allegedly, right? So iPhone 15, that means iPhone is 15 years old. And think about, how much time has passed in the last 15 years, and then you contextualize that with the older adult population that we serve. A 65-year-old in 2008 is now 80 years old. Right. So that's the average age roughly that we start to see people investigating communities like ours and making a commitment to communities like ours. So there's a very strong possibility that when that older adult was still in the workforce, they may have been given an iPhone. And so they're very familiar with it. And now when they move into communities like ours, there's expectations that they can do the same things that they used to be able to do at home, like, order coffee using an app, or order groceries using an app, or get transportation using an app, or whatever. And I think that, we've started to see it with some of our newest residents moving in over the last year or so. There's an expectation that, we're going to have the capability to do these things. But just like Patricia, I think that there's a lot of value in intentionally defining the outcomes of the technology for people, whatever it is, right? This is going to benefit you this way, or a multitude of different ways, and let the person identify with what resonates the best with them, so that they're willing to adopt it. That's sort of been our secret to success with adopting technology.
Excellent. And I love how you brought up the fact that, yes, Apple's been around for 15 years. And I remember I waited outside overnight for the first iPhone. But nonetheless, we have to assume that many of our residents today are used to the technology. And so that partially is a myth that I believe we have to keep knocking down, because our residents are younger today than they were years ago. They're already familiar with technology. They already know what it can do for them. And I've come up to this over and over and over again since starting Senior Savvy. And the myth is that older adults are not interested in technology, or they're not capable of learning it. And that is not the case.
100%. 100%. You know, a lot of our newest residents have moved in and found it to be rather disappointing that they can't pay their bill online. And it's like, gosh, yeah, we should really have that ability. They're used to paying their electric bill online. They're used to paying their mortgage online. They're used to paying their car insurance online. It's like, why can't we pay this? Why can't you pay the monthly service fee online, right? And so we're sort of rapidly catching up with that. But you look at everything that we do, from move-in to paying that bill, it's like there's a lot of room for us to increase the ability to, you know, digitally transform the way that we're doing things and transacting with the residents that we have.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I want to talk about a different type of limitation, and that's a physical limitation. A lot of the people I work with, their eyesight may be diminishing, or maybe they're losing the dexterity in their fingers. So where and what role does a resident's physical limitations play in learning new technology?
I mean, I agree with you that eyesight is a challenge, Abbie, certainly. Hearing is also sometimes a challenge. There's also dexterity, and my resident population may be a little older than Joe's. Most Juniper communities are assisted living. So our resident move-in age is probably 5 years past Joe's for our leading edge. So we're not quite as many. We probably don't have very many baby boomers at this point, but we're getting ready for them. The interesting thing, I think, is that we do have residents, even if they never used a device before, who are comfortable using voice. Mm-hmm. So we are moving in many of our communities to using more voice-based services, and Alexa's been around long enough now that a lot of people are familiar with it. So the speaker technology, speaking of which, I should turn mine off.
She's about to get noisy.
If I talk about her, she likes to get involved in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, mine's quiet now. But there does, I do think we need to be aware and help people. There's also an element of confidence that you and I have, or many of us have, that use devices all the time, with what a tap is, or what a swipe is, or what a double click is, that is has moved into the realm of unconscious competence.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is not there for some of our friends that are learning to use devices for the first time.
Yeah.
So there is that sense of explaining things that have gone beneath our consciousness that I think we need to be ready to do. And that, you know, maybe something that you share, Abbie, when you're doing seminars and things. That's
all the time. All the time I do. I always assume that this is the first time you're holding this device. And it's shocking to hear that a lot of my students have never been taught how to power off their device. That's very different than going to sleep. Very, very different. It has a different impact and a different, action. Very, very different. And I never assumed that they know this is called your dock, and that's why you want to put your most frequently used applications or apps, and it's called an app rather than an application because of this, right? And so on, because all of these devices are just handed to them without a manual. And my students are scholars, and correct me if I'm wrong, the people I work with, they're scholars. They're very formal learners. They're not dinosaurs. They're scholars. Right. And so when you can teach them a basic foundation of the technology and you give them the terminology, they feel so much more empowered to continue to use it and to learn independently. Now, one thing that I come across all the time is that people will say, well, I'm afraid to break it. Do you get that also?
Go ahead, Joe.
I think we get that less than we used to, and I've gotten intentional about telling people, like, you can't break it, or if you do break it, we know how to fix it. Just to kind of break down the fear of utilizing something, you know.
Yeah.
And I think with anybody, right, whether you look at, you know, my son or my spouse or my mom and dad or my grandparents, there's just a fear of, like, I don't want to use this the wrong way for fear of, you know, me breaking it. It's an expensive item, or it's going to cause somebody a lot of heartache if I do it wrong. But I think kind of breaking that down for people and saying, like, it's okay to use it, you know, like, don't worry about, the machine doesn't have feelings, right? You can utilize it and not be afraid of breaking it. And even if you do break it, we have the in-house expertise how to fix it, right?
Yeah, unless you drop it in water or you run over it with your car, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. So let's just talk about that myth again. And you know, a couple of years ago, we could say that older adults are resistant to learning technology, but is it true to say they have a much slower learning curve? Have you found that with your residents?
I feel like my folks pick up things quickly, but this takes me back to the idea that there is a level of assumption of knowledge that applications, even those designed for older adults, have built in. Things like 3 lines means it's a menu, or a question mark means that's help, or 3 dots means it's an ellipse and there's more beyond it. Or a pencil means click this and you can edit. Those things are assumed by software designers and the developers as these are universal symbols now. Well, they're not for older adults. And folks that are designing for that group would really do well to put the word help underneath the question mark, or put menu next to those 3 lines. It's not as clean.
Right.
I understand, but I really don't think we can assume that the iconography of the technology is really there yet.
Now, for me, I'm really big on diagrams. So there are a lot of times I will create a diagram of a home screen, for instance, and like, this is what this means. This is what this means, and make it really clear with a diagram. And those are really hard to come by.
I agree.
Yeah.
I resonate with what Patricia is talking about there. You know, I think for a lot of people who are technologists or people who use technology and grew up with technology, there's this idea that user interface, user experience has to be super, super efficient, right? And we count the number of clicks to get from point A to point B, or the number of taps to get from point A to point B. And I think for many older adults, it's not about the number of taps or the number of clicks. It's about the logical path to get from A to B, right? You know, the great thing about many older adults is that they have the luxury of time on their hands. There's not a lot of places that they need to be or things that they need to be doing, and so clicking 3 extra things or 4 extra things, as long as it's a logical path, is something that's oftentimes appreciated, or having a way back out. You know, once you get down the rabbit hole, having a way back out is super important, I think, for a lot of people too. And we learned that with our most recent deployment of the K4 platform, the K4 Connect platform, for our digital front door experience for our residents. You know, there is a desire for efficiency within the app, but there's also a strong desire for laying out information in a way that makes sense to a lot of people. We got a lot of opinions from a lot of people about how we're organizing information, how we're organizing buttons, how we're organizing actions within the app. And everybody, you know, just wanted there to be a logic behind that. And it was less about the number of clicks. It was more about, like, how does this make sense to access this? So I think that that's super important. And, you know, to me, I get frustrated when I'm using an app and I can't, like, swipe with my thumb left or right to get the gestures aren't as important to older adults. You know, clicking a button that makes sense, having that label under the button, I think is more important than, you know, being able to use all those fancy gestures.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 100%. And, you know, I want to now move into an area that's top of mind for me, and that's privacy and security. And, you know, at Senior Savvy, we're always teaching about how to be more secure online and how to be aware of scams and that type of thing. When it comes to your residents, how much does privacy play into the use of technology?
You know, for us, it's super important. You know, we take privacy extremely seriously here. You know, we make sure we safeguard all of our resident information in as many ways as possible, multi-factor authentication for everything, et cetera. But I think for our residents in particular, it's super important to them too. They want to make sure that their, you know, insurance information isn't going to get compromised, or their financial information is going to get compromised, or their contact information is going to get compromised. So there's often a level of concern when it comes to engaging with new technology. It's like, what have you done to keep my information safe, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, we have to explain to them that, you know, yes, we are creating this interoperability, or we are creating this exchange of information, but it's for your benefit, right? And once you kind of point that out to people, the light kind of goes on. Like, you already trade so much personal information when you go to Google, or when you go to Facebook or something like that. You've already indicated that you trust Cypress as a provider by, you know, moving here, living here, and paying us a lot of money to live here every month. Why not trust us just a little bit more with that technology information, so that we can provide better care for you and have better insight into your care? But let's make sure that Cypress is doing a good job of caretaking and you know, curating that information in a responsible way.
Yeah. How about for you, Patricia?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Joe. I think it's top of mind not only for residents, but also for resident families. In our case, where we have a lot of residents in memory care and assisted living, we have a strong family involvement from that perspective too. And in rolling out voice technology, we already talked about my Alexa device listening to me. There is concern, right, about I have a speaker that's listening to me in my room. So, you know, the anonymization of the devices, the fact that they don't hold credit cards, that they don't hold payment. You cannot buy anything with the Alexa device that you get from Juniper. Everything is erased at midnight every day. Sadly, it means it doesn't learn your favorite music genre and play it for you, but it does preserve privacy. So there's always a balance there, I think, in personalization and privacy.
Yeah, I'm always encouraging my students to lean into the two-factor authentication, because it's verifying their identity in an additional way. And I know that for a lot of older adults, it is so frustrating, right? To have to go there and go to the email and then come back to there, you know, so we do talk
Frustrates
a lot
me sometimes.
But I'm always telling them, I'm like, just lean into it, right? Because it's there for your protection. So now I want to talk about devices, okay? Because you know, I would say about 90% of my students are using Apple devices. And so are there certain devices, in your opinion, that are more intuitive for older adults to use over other devices?
At the risk of, you know, having this turn into the great Android versus Apple debate, I will say that, you know, the majority of our residents are Apple device users as well. And, you know, there's been a lot of analysts who have broken down the differences between Android and Apple, and the pros and cons of both. I think what Apple does really well for older adults is they give you sort of a limited ecosystem to play within, right? There's very defined, clearly articulated, intentional ways that Apple wants you to use their devices. And so, you know, going from an iPhone to an iPad is virtually seamless, because they're the same device basically. You know, Apple Watch, very much like an iPhone or Apple iPad experience. Mac OS quite a bit different, but still very common within that ecosystem. I think, once you get beyond that, you start looking at Windows and Android, which have their own great benefits. It's just there's a lot more customization. There's a lot more that can happen with that. And for somebody who didn't grow up using technology, it's a little bit safer to stay inside that closed ecosystem that isn't going to allow you to get down so many different rabbit holes.
Great answer. Patricia, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I would second the fact that Apple is more straightforward, I think, for a lot of older adults to use. And I would say that we have had pretty good intuitive success with Amazon's Alexa. That once you get the idea of how it works, you can kind of guess what question you need to ask or how to ask it. I will say it is a blast to watch someone in their 90s who has literally never had access to the Google Sphere figure out that they can get the Yankee score from last night without the newspaper.
Yeah.
So I think there is an intuitive element to using voice after a little while.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, we're doing a lot with voice here too. Smart home across the campus, being able to control the home from your voice or from the app. And I was amazed at how quickly our residents picked up on that technology. It's just, it's almost second nature for an 85-year-old, the same way it is for my 7-year-old at home, right? Like, Alexa, turn on the kitchen. Alexa, change the temperature. It's just so heartwarming to watch them interact with that technology using that voice AI assistant. It's really incredible to watch.
I agree. It's also one of the more affordable devices that you can install in a community. Have you found that as well?
I think we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room to find ROI when you look at those voice assistants, right?
Okay.
Look at what they can do and what the cost of that is. There's a lot of ROI to be found there. And I think we're going to continue to see that ROI continue to increase. I think I've been telling people it feels like we're not quite in the AI age yet. If we're likening it to a baseball game, we're probably like in the batter's warm-up box right now of the AI age, getting ready to walk up to the plate. But AI is going to significantly change, what we can do with those voice assistants. And so much of what we do within a community today is going to sort of be put under the hood and go into that box. And that box is going to have answers for just about anything that a resident will have questions on.
I want to ask you a final question about our residents and that have more cognitive challenges. Have you found certain technologies that have been really well designed for them?
I think anytime you can find a technology that doesn't need to have a lot of control, there's not a lot of interaction, that can be a meaningful technology for folks who have cognitive decline. We have a memory care unit here with 44 beds, and oftentimes we'll have a spouse of a resident that needs to move to that memory care unit because they've advanced, pretty far along that cognitive decline. And we have used Echo devices, Alexa devices, for that specific purpose, where a spouse can be on one part of the campus and use the drop-in feature of that Echo device to communicate with their spouse. There's, nothing that needs to happen from the spouse's perspective. They're in the room. It says, Joe is dropping in, and all of a sudden I've got two-way communication, or maybe even two-way video communication with that person using that device, and that's been very powerful.
Yeah.
Smart.
I would second that with the ability to make phone calls by voice. Many people can remember how to say, Alexa, call Abbie, and that, making a phone call without needing to do technology, actually, except voice, is wonderful. We've also had a blast in our memory care neighborhoods using ChatGPT and DALL-E, the art generating AI, to write short stories with our residents or do memoirs with our residents and create art to
Cool.
match. And that is magical and simple.
Yeah.
And that's really been a lot of fun in all our neighborhoods, but including memory care.
That's awesome. I've also taught classes on ChatGPT and just teaching residents, how to help write the minutes for your meetings, right? And how you can get ideas for different things just to help you move forward with what it is you want to do well. And I'm just kind of laughing because someone said, Alexa, call Abbie. I get so many. I'm going to call them butt calls because I'm at the top of everyone's address list, AB, right? I get so many. I just think it's love. It's love. It's love. That's all it is.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it just always kind of gives me a laugh there. Well, guys, with just a minute or so left to go, is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers today in regards to resident adoption that we haven't already touched on?
We touched on the topic of AI briefly, and I've been really paying very careful attention to evolvements in artificial intelligence here lately. We recently published a page on the Cypress Living website that talks about how our organization is responsibly utilizing AI, as well as the way that we envision other organizations or senior living providers specifically utilizing AI. And I want to share that with the group as it may be a beneficial resource for other aging services providers here. So if you visit ai.cypressliving.org, there's a whole page of content out there on artificial intelligence, and that may be a resource that's good for your organization too.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'll make sure to post that. Any final words from Patricia?
Gosh, I would say, and Joe would probably second this. Just don't assume you know how they do.
Yeah.
Let them tell you, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's the best teaching method. Don't assume you know and let them tell you. And absolutely. I love that. Well, guys, thank you so much for being with me today. Joe, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you more?
LinkedIn is the best way. I love connecting with folks on LinkedIn. Try to stay active on there. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best way to connect.
And for you, Patricia?
Yeah, that works great. You could also email me. It's very, very simple, though very, very long. It's just patricia.jacobs@junipercommunities.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for talking about tech adoption. And thank you for those of you who are in our chat commenting. I value your input. And we will see you all back here next week.